Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. My guest today is Nile Ali. Nile is a friend of mine from Rutgers University. We met our freshman year in Tinsley Hall. I've had some other freshman year friends on the program, if that's what I can call them, or just college friends. But most of them have been API brothers, so this was nice to get a different perspective. Nile's also a Jersey City native, so I had some questions for him about what this has been like on the other side of the Hudson, right? Close but far, and Niall definitely, he is a New York native almost. You could probably drop the almost from that as well. I mean, he spent so much time in the city. So I think that was also a good way to look at the pandemic, coming at it from sort of a two-state perspective. Whereas I'm just very much grounded in the city. He was able to juxtapose the two situations. And we also, of course, talk about what's on everybody's mind with the protests and police brutality. And we talk about that within the context of the pandemic, and then also sort of separately on its own, which I think speaks to the COVID chat program a bit as well. It's just that it's shifted as it's gone on. It's a malleable program. We've started out talking very much solely about the pandemic and how people's lives were changing. And now we're just talking a little bit about what's it like living within the pandemic and people's other thoughts and interests. And sort of, I just try to keep it fresh and natural, and I'm not going to force any conversations. I'll ask questions that I'm curious about, but, if we start talking about something else that's not directly COVID related, I think that's okay. You'll have to forgive me if it's not. But yeah, no, it was another great conversation. Don't miss out on this one. Unfortunately, the audio at times wasn't great on Niall's end, so I did my best there. But we'll just have to work through that. And yeah, so here it is, episode 37 of COVID Chats. Hello, Niall, and welcome to episode 37 of COVID Chats.
Ruben, what's up, man? How are you?
I am well, dude. It's great to have you on the program.
I'm excited to finally be on. I mean, I've been watching all these episodes, wondering when it's going to be my turn. And glad you finally reached out.
Yeah.
Went all the way down the list.
Well, listen, there's plenty more to come. So when this is all said and done, you'll be one of the earlier ones.
Wow, I'll be an OG.
Hopefully.
That's great to know.
We'll see. I can't guarantee that, but anyways, yeah. I mean, it's a pleasure to have you on. I like mixing it up with talking to older, more experienced people, and also talking to younger people. So, my last guest was on the older spectrum, and was a director of diversity and inclusion, and had some interesting thoughts to say about our current moment. And I'm definitely interested in talking to you about that. And
sure.
we have a
bit of talking to you about that.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. And just for the background of it, of course, we met freshman year of college, and it was really a pleasure.
Lived in the same dorm.
Lived in the same dorm, same floor, it's always been great hanging out with you in the city. I remember our times doing some Uber Eats together, and it was great reconnecting last week.
Ready to eat days.
Ready to eat. That's right. I had the owner or somebody who works for them on the program earlier, so that was fun to hear about.
That was a great episode.
That was a good one. But before we just jump into everything related to the pandemic and the protests and all that, I just like to always ask my guests, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm pretty hungry right now. My stomach is rumbling. I hope you can't hear it, but besides that, honestly, once the weather broke, I feel a lot of tension was released. Just being able to go back outside. I just bought a bike. Being able to ride my bike, having some freedom. It's been great for my emotional and mental well-being.
Yeah.
But of course, right after that, everything with the killing of George Floyd happened, which was extremely stressful, and that stuff is traumatizing. It's just traumatizing.
Yeah.
And everything we've seen as a result, the riots, protests, the government's response, the police response, It's been stressful, but I think that I'm coming out of, I'm out of that, or coming out of that and back again, just being grateful to be alive,
Yeah.
healthy, and living in the best city in the world, So
Woo!
uh can't complain too much. Can't complain too much. I guess I'd say I'm doing pretty good.
Good. Well, I'm happy to hear that. You're the first guest who's ever talked about sort of their immediate feelings of like hunger or needing to go to the bathroom or something like that. So I like that. I think that shows that we're getting back to quote unquote normal a little bit.
A little
Because
bit, little
yeah,
by little.
so that's great. And I'm glad you're also able to find a little bit of relief, in the good weather and being able to get out on your bike a little bit.
Of
That
course.
certainly helped
I
me.
love the summer.
Yeah.
I love the sun. I love hot weather.
Woo!
Actually, I'm probably the only one in the world who I love when it's humid outside. I don't know why. It just feels like a hug. The air is hugging you.
That's I don't think I've ever heard anyone really who enjoys humidity, but I guess I just met the first one. So
Different strokes for different folks.
so you alluded to being in the greatest city in the world. With that, I know you're talking about New York City, but
Yes,
you're currently in Jersey City, which is of course
in Jersey
adjacent
City.
to, and you're from Jersey City. What's it like? What's the pandemic been like in Jersey City, both when it first happened and sort of now?
So, so actually, when it first happened, I was living in the East Village, and
Oh,
when it first started, like those first 2 weeks, I was living in the East Village, and uh, I wasn't planning on staying. I was just, essentially just watching a friend's house who travels for work, and he was out of town for about a month, and he said, "Hey, I have a dog. You want to stay here and watch my dog? Blah blah blah." Of course,
sure.
it's a studio in the East Village. It's beautiful. Why not?
Yeah.
So I was staying there. Then all this started happening, and oddly enough, in the very early stages, more of the pan seemed to be in Jersey than it was in the city. It seemed like in the city things were still going business as usual. In New Jersey, people were fighting in supermarkets,
Mm,
kind of situation. You know what I mean?
sure.
But then, as a couple of days went by, I think the moment that everything changed was the night that they suspended the NBA season, and that what's the guy's name? Tom Hanks tested positive.
Yeah.
After that night, I felt the shift in the country of like, oh shit, this is serious.
Yeah.
And the day after that, I went to ShopRite. I was actually in New Jersey. Went to ShopRite in Newark, and it was pandemonium. It was insane. I had to wait online inside the store for about almost an hour. And people were just in there going nuts,
Mm,
just grabbing everything they could find, pretty much. But I would say after that, I was still living in the East Village. I had just happened to be in Newark that day. Coming back to the East Village, a lot of supermarkets still had a lot in stock. I tried to avoid Whole Foods because I figured that would be, pandemonium central. Everyone, oh, I got to get my blood oranges to last me. You know,
my almond butter.
yeah. So I went to there's a Key Food near my house on Second Ave and Fourth. Actually, no, I'm sorry, on Avenue A and Fourth.
Hmm.
And I would go there and get everything because I guess for whatever reason, people weren't really uh, hitting that store as much as they were other stores. So I was
Sure.
able to get a ton of meat, a ton of canned goods, a ton of dried things like rice, beans, just things that you should have in case
Right.
of an emergency like this.
Staples. Staples.
So, and what I also noticed in the city is that in the early stages, I would see maybe one or two people wearing a mask. Then the next day, I'd see 3 or 5 people wearing a mask.
Right.
Then a week later, 50% of people were wearing masks.
Yeah.
It was interesting to just watch the surge in the wearing of masks over
Yeah.
time. Um, but I would say the biggest thing between Jersey City and New York City in terms of of the pandemic and everything that was going on was two different governors, so two different lockdowns.
Mm,
Um, in New Jersey, the governor was a little softer. A lot of the restrictions, such as the curfew and the stay-at-home order were not mandatory at all.
Mm.
So if in the last 3 months I wanted to leave my house, and not that I would do this because it's irresponsible, but if I wanted to leave my house and go hang out with 3 friends at another friend's house, there's nothing anybody could do about it.
Right.
As opposed to maybe in, New York City, where they shut down the subway from 1 to 5 a.m. They
Yeah.
reduce service. They, a lot of things like this.
Yeah.
So, here it's been pretty laid back. The actual government response, not laid back in the sense that they don't care, because
Sure.
we've actually in Jersey City we've had a rigorous testing program. Uh, Anybody can go get tested. Anybody can go get tested for the antibodies.
Mm.
We opened that up pretty quickly, and it's amazing that we are right. Like if I walked out my house right now, I'd be in Manhattan in 12 minutes. Considering how close we are, it's amazing that we don't have more cases.
Mm.
We have a high amount of cases, but there's parts of New Jersey with higher cases, which is odd, just considering like we're right outside of the city.
Right. Why do you think that is, maybe?
That's a good question. I guess part of it is that the main has to do with one, people commuting to work.
Yeah.
So once jobs started closing, nobody would, that whole subset of people were not going in and out of the city.
Right.
And the second thing, people go to the city just for leisure and entertainment, of course.
Right.
And once all that stopped,
Sure.
and once felt the need to stay home, then there wasn't as much exchange,
Right.
because there is no land border between Jersey City. You can't walk or just go down the street and be in Manhattan.
Right.
You have to get on a train or ferry or drive into the city. So it's not as to say, hey, Jersey City to Hoboken, where, oh, maybe I want to go to that store to see if I can get some groceries there.
Right.
And I'd be going into Hoboken often. Yeah, exactly. So there's a bit of a barrier between Jersey City and New York. And
Right.
I think that may be part of the reason. But I also think a part of the reason that the part of New Jersey with the highest amount of cases was Bergen County.
Mm.
Bergen County has a very large and tight-knit Orthodox Jewish community. A lot of the people in that community travel into upstate New York
Yeah.
over the George Washington Bridge, often to go to shul, to go visit family, to go to all types of, things related to the Jewish community. So I think they may have been hit harder because of that.
Yeah.
Because even once things started closing, there was still a cultural or religious reason to continue traveling into the city.
Right. Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. I mean, shuls definitely did close at a certain point, but it was on the later end. I mean, that was also a
Right.
big reason why some of those communities were hit hard, was right before things closed down. It was the Jewish celebration of Purim, and everybody was
Yes.
very close to each other and drinking and touching and
Yep.
having a good time, and that was right before things closed up, and there were definitely
Right.
people who were sick. I know a couple people from my synagogue who got sick and things like that. So I think you are right about that.
Yeah. I was very worried about that because I feel like
Yeah.
there are a lot of older, I feel like the Orthodox community, there's a lot of participation from the older
Yeah.
members that are
Absolutely.
over the age of 60, over the age of 70. And these are the people that are extremely respected, and their presence would be expected
Right.
at any event. And
Right.
they feel a duty to show up at these events and lead
Right.
them and just be there. So,
Yeah.
seeing a disease that primarily is, to me, it seemed like, oh man, I'm really worried about them. But I'm glad that although they were hit hard, I think, I don't think it was as bad as it could have been
Yeah.
for the Orthodox community. And I'm glad that everybody, once things became more clear, everybody understood, okay, we have to protect ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to
Yeah.
follow these guidelines. We have to protect ourselves.
Yeah. I think people did wise up to it at a certain point, and also I think the what we saw with Italy certainly set an example here with how badly their older generations were hit, and I think we tried to
Right.
mitigate that as much as possible. What's the situation like in Jersey City now?
So right now, I would say it's been pretty similar for the last 2 weeks. Like I said, mostly since the weather broke, everything kind of changed.
How's
Uh, I've noticed, obviously I've been taking my bike out, so I ride downtown, I ride through the parks. I've noticed a lot more people out, a lot more people in parks, in groups of people that more than likely aren't their household or
right?
their immediate family. So people are essentially socializing again at
Mm,
a not safe distance,
right.
um, having picnics,
Yeah.
playing playing sports, just uh just socializing, socializing in groups again, outside at least. And it seems to, at first when if you saw videos online, people would go up to groups of people like, hey, you're being irresponsible, you shouldn't be doing this,
Right.
you guys are not social distancing.
Right.
I haven't seen that in Jersey City. I've seen, people not following the guidelines, but people just kind of minding their business about it and saying, hey, to each his own.
Mm. And what about mask wearing? Are these people who are socializing wearing masks, or have you seen mask usage go down, or is it still maintained?
I would say, well, at first, when this started, at least in Jersey City, I would say in most of America too, it was hard to get a mask because most of the masks were being diverted to
Hospital.
hospitals and
Right.
nurses and things like that. And
Right.
also, the CDC, or maybe it was the World Health Organization, but I believe it was the CDC, had recommended or had issued an advice that it wasn't necessary to wear a mask,
Yeah. Yeah.
which from the beginning to
Right.
me didn't make any sense because we literally watched this unfold in other countries where they said you have to wear a mask,
Yeah.
but they were telling us here that a mask isn't really necessary.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 weeks later, they said, oh, actually, maybe everybody should be wearing a mask.
Right.
But since then, everybody's been able to get a mask.
Yeah.
So that's when I noticed the biggest jump in the wearing a mask. So if I were to go outside right now, the vast majority of people I see, even walking outside, would have a mask on.
That's good.
Even now, when people are socializing in parks, I noticed that nobody's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
When people are having picnics with their friends or things like that, nobody is wearing a mask. I know a lot of people that are walking on the street or riding their bikes aren't wearing masks either. The
Wow.
most place that I see masks are outdoors and business because you have to wear masks inside stores and businesses by law. Also, on the train, people wear masks, obviously, because you also have to wear that by law. And of course, you're in an enclosed space, so it just makes a lot more sense to wear a mask.
Mm. I've seen that pretty similarly in New York. The only difference I would say, I mean, certainly as you said, I mean, I haven't taken public transit, but in stores, everybody's wearing a mask because that's required.
Right.
I will say that on the street, though, people in New York are still wearing masks very consistently. I mean, I'd say the compliance is at least 90%, if not 95%.
Hmm.
But definitely what you alluded to about the parks and people socializing. I mean, when I go through the parks or take a bike ride, nobody's wearing a mask if they're hanging
How do you
out.
feel about that? About people wearing masks outside, just outside, outdoors?
Yeah, I mean there's been a lot of differing science and studies done on it and about the transmission, and a lot of people don't think it's very high if you're outside. I guess I just have the concern about if you're asymptomatic and I'm on a
Right.
bike and the person ahead of me is on their bike and they're
You just
breathing
ride through their
heavily.
stream.
Exactly. So, and there was like a Dutch study about that. I mean, it's very hard to know, and my opinion on it kind of shifts as more information comes out, and I try to keep myself educated on it, but I also
Of
try not
course,
to drown myself in Corona news. So,
of course,
yeah,
of course.
I want people to be safe, and I want them to wear a mask as much as they can. But I also recognize that if you're on a bench far away from people and you're reading, you don't need to have a mask on.
Right.
It's
Of
okay.
course.
You're okay in that regard. But if a big group is passing by you, you want to just quickly, throw it up. There's nothing, that's probably for the best, for your own sake and also for theirs. I mean,
Right.
so yeah, I mean that's kind of my feelings on
Understandable.
it. Yeah, but we'll
I'm a
see.
little bit. I'm a little bit of an anti outdoors mask guy.
Yeah.
I don't, from what I've seen, from the studies I've seen that majority of these studies, they've said that the risk of outdoor transmission in open air is extremely low.
Mm.
Uh, so I mean, of course, like if you're, for example, if you're at a protest and you're surrounded by people and you're essentially probably in just a cloud of air that people are yelling, people are chanting. It's probably just in a cloud of air coming out of those people's bodies.
Yeah.
In that situation, you should definitely be wearing a mask. I believe, if you're just, say I'm riding my bike in the middle of the street, just going down, I don't know, just riding around in the street, I wouldn't feel the need to wear a mask. I just think about how particles travel, aerodynamics, things like that. More likely particles are going to go around your body like that
Absolutely.
into the airstreams that pass. The odds of them going directly into your nose or mouth are just less than this. You get what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
I think
but this isn't any medical advice. Don't take my word for it. This is just my personal,
yeah,
obviously,
no,
idea of it.
absolutely. I want your account of it for
Right.
documentation sake, and I think it's interesting for the audience and for me just to hear it. Certainly, I know you don't have an MD, but you know,
Massive.
massive doctor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that protest, honestly, it's a good segue here. I'm curious, what do you think of the protests for George Floyd? We talked about it personally a little bit on our bike ride, but as the protests begin to peter out a bit, what are you thinking of them now? I mean, how effective
So
were they?
the
Were
first
was
thing I
there a
would say
danger? Oh,
is,
yeah, sorry.
sorry.
No, 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 no. Okay, go.
First thing I'd say is, I don't think the protests are petering out. I
Okay.
think they're just becoming less visible
Mm,
online and in the news. Because I don't have a source that's telling me, oh, there's a protest here, there's a protest there, whatever. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I was just riding my bike in the city and I just happened to see a huge protest going on of all cyclists. And there were thousands of cyclists, and I joined them. And I would guess that a lot of people in that protest were in the same position as me. They just were riding a bike and they saw a protest. It was a cause they agreed with, and they said, "Hey, I want to join." On top of that, yesterday I was just heading to a park. I bought some beers. I was just going to hang out in the park and sit with a friend, distance, but just together, obviously. And when we got to the liquor store, it's across the street from Jersey City Hall. In front of City Hall, there was a massive protest going on. So I think protests are still going on all over the country. I think they're just not getting as much news coverage now because you know how our news cycle doesn't focus on things for very long. I'm amazed that it's even focused on the coronavirus for as long as it did.
yeah.
But these protests have been going on for about two and a half, 3 weeks now. I feel like they're already trying to move on to the next thing.
Mm,
Of course. But I do think the protests still have a lot of momentum. As we see, there are changes being made all over the world. I mean, the biggest thing I just saw yesterday, they're taking cops off the air.
off the.
Off the air. They're canceling Cops. Cops is not coming back. The show.
Oh, the TV show.
Yeah, it's the TV show,
Okay.
the famous TV show.
Yeah. Okay.
And to me, that's huge because I think as a kid, everybody likes watching Cops. It's like, oh, cops and robbers. It's interesting. It's entertaining.
Right.
But once you get older, at some point I was older and Cops came on. I sat there and watched it. I'm like, why is there just a show about the cops harassing people over like a bag of weed or,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, expired tags or something
Yeah.
like, this show is actually insane. But even worse is that there's millions of people that enjoy watching this.
Right. Right.
And to me, that is a sign of something unhealthy, that the citizens of a country enjoy watching a reality TV show of people just being arrested or harassed or humiliated for small infractions. And watching these shows, it often is, majority of time it's a white officer,
Mm,
and the majority of time the suspect or the person they're criminalizing is a minority.
yeah.
And I think this show has been on for a generation or two.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
been on for a while, and I think a lot of what we see in Cops has seeped into the psyche of not only the general American public, but into cops themselves
Mm.
or people who want to be cops. And this already gives them an idea of, oh, this is what it's going to be like when I'm a cop. It's going to be like this TV show.
Right.
And they behave as such.
Mm.
So I'm glad that they're taking cops off the air. And I think, without these protests, without all of this stuff, none of this would be happening. It would just be another hashtag. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we've seen too many of these hashtags, too many of these unarmed Black men and women killed by the police on video and not on video, and nothing has changed in all of these occasions.
Yeah.
The best we've gotten has been police wearing body cams, but what use is that if the police can turn the body cams off?
Yeah.
Which they seemingly do pretty often.
Yeah.
But I feel like in my lifetime, this is the first time that I've seen protests cause material change.
Mm.
And I don't think we've seen this in this country since the 60s. I can't think of any time where mass protest, or maybe in the 80s with the AIDS movement and gay people protesting about the way Reagan was handling the AIDS crisis. I think that may have been the last time that mass protests actually led to monumental change.
Mm.
And I see it happening now. I mean, it's little things here and there, but there's also big things. I mean, small surface level things like Lego pulling off police play sets, canceling cops, school districts cutting ties with police, taking down Confederate statues, disbanding police departments. There's many different levels of these changes, but the fact that so many are happening right now in the span of 3 weeks, all these things have happened. That's huge. That to me is huge. And if nothing else comes out of these protests, I think the most important thing is that people can see that protest does work.
Totally.
It does work.
Yeah. Amen to that.
But what's really, of course, to bring it back to COVID, these protests are happening in the middle of the coronavirus outbreak,
Right.
which is extremely, extremely interesting.
And concerning.
I
mean, do you think
it's
like
very concerning? But
yeah.
the thing is, nobody didn't know that the coronavirus is out here. We all have the knowledge. We're all aware that coronavirus is out here and it's dangerous and it's deadly. And even more so, a higher percentage of African Americans have died from the virus. So I think it says a lot that people know it's out here. They know deadly virus is out here, and they're so enraged by that injustice that they're willing to risk their lives and the lives of their families to come out and enforce change. And to come out and protest in the middle of a pandemic. I think that's never happened in the history of this country.
Right.
Except of course, which is odd, about 2 weeks before you had the people protesting the lockdowns.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is none of those people wore masks because that was against their whole ideology.
Yeah.
All of these protesters, from all the videos online I've seen, from the protests I've seen in person, I would say 95% of people have on a mask.
Yeah.
Which is important. People are giving out hand sanitizer. People are just generally being proactive and recognizing that, hey, okay, we're going to do this, but we still have to keep in mind that a pandemic is taking place. We are in the middle of a pandemic right now.
Yeah.
So it's been very interesting. And what's been really heartbreaking to me is the way that at the beginning of this pandemic and even up till now, there's been a huge focus and concentration on honoring healthcare workers and lifting them up and making them heroes essentially. But in so many videos from these protests, we've seen nurses and others that work in healthcare who are acting as medics for the protesters being assaulted by the police. So it's kind of like, are they heroes or are they enemies? Which one is it? You have to ask. ask these people, which one is it? Because 2 weeks ago they were heroes. This week they're getting shot with rubber bullets. It doesn't make any sense to me. But of course, it makes perfect sense, because if you see the protesters as your enemy, then you would see anybody who's trying to help them as your enemy, of course, naturally.
Mm.
So I think it's important to see that, and how healthcare treaters were treated during the pandemic, before the protest, and how they're being treated when they decide to protest or help protesters.
I think you raise a lot of good points there, and it's definitely, there's been a lot of troubling things here, both with media portrayal of protesters, and saying that people aren't wearing masks when they are wearing masks. I mean, the protests that I've gone to, everyone's had a mask. And then going back to what you said earlier regarding the media and cops,
Right.
and how it reinforces, just bad stereotypes and bad modeling for both future cops and for kids to think like, oh, this is how the police act, and that's okay, and that's just because that's just learned behavior on TV, and
That's just normal.
right, that's just normal. I'm curious
Right.
about the other cop show, Live PD, if they're planning on bringing that back.
So yeah, they actually pulled it temporarily, and they haven't announced whether it's going to be coming back or not, but they have pulled it off the air.
I see. Well, that'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Related to the pandemic, of course, this is something I've talked about to some people on the show, but it's definitely a statistic that's been talked about a lot, regardless, in the news, but about how Black and brown communities have been hit much harder by the pandemic. I'm wondering how that sits with you, and if that, what's the weight there? How do we balance? We must protest so that something positive comes out of this, but at the same time, there's fear that the protest could exacerbate the pandemic, which would then in turn come back and hurt Black and brown communities even more. So it's like, I mean, I do in the end, my opinion on it would be that the protests are a positive thing, and that people are taking the right precautions. But even maybe aside from the protest, how is that statistic, and how is that news piece hit you in terms
I think a great now maybe you call this an analogy, but just something to think about.
Sure.
George Floyd tested positive for coronavirus. He survived coronavirus, but he was killed by a cop.
Mm.
I think that's kind of the general feeling of everybody. It's like, if the coronavirus doesn't kill me, a cop will.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like balancing risk. Or another way to think about it is, if there was a hurricane right now, and we would still have to go to shelters regardless. They wouldn't worry about social distancing, because there would be an immediate threat.
Right.
And they've said this in FEMA guidelines and CDC guidelines, that if there's a hurricane or other natural disaster, that's your main priority. Don't worry about the virus in that situation. Just focus on getting to shelter and to safety. Right. So I think that's kind of the idea that a lot of people have, is that we've been dealing with this injustice, obviously, since the founding of this country, since before this country was founded, since it was colonized by the English, by the French, by the Spanish. And of course, once this country was founded, it was founded on these things that obviously didn't apply to everybody.
Yeah.
Because slaves weren't seen as everybody, they were seen as property. And we've essentially been dealing with that for quite a long time. And in the last 5 years or so, I feel like police brutality has become even more visible due to cell phones, surveillance, body cams, etc. And of course, more proliferated because of the internet. So it spreads far and wide, and we all see it. So we've been all seeing these horrific acts of what I would just call terror, horrific acts of terror inflicted on Black and brown bodies, and there's been no consequences for it. So in this situation, I think for the first time, we've had a video of this happening, where even the most conservative, far right, alt right, whatever you want to call it, could not find any way to rationalize or justify what happened.
Right.
because they'll always find something. They'll say, "Oh, he robbed the store. Oh, he was being aggressive. Oh, he was under the influence. Oh, he has a criminal record."
Right.
Oh, he resisted. He reached for the officer's gun.
Right.
He wasn't following orders. This, that, or the third. I think for the first time, we have a video where this person did everything he was supposed to do, and he still ended up being killed. And I think that is part of why it just hit something so human in everybody, of just feeling threatened, of us all feeling threatened, not just Black people, but even white people. I feel like said, "Hey, I don't feel safe. I feel threatened. I feel like there is an immediate threat." And this is something that to me is, to them, or to all of us, is more serious than the virus.
Mm.
I think as we're coming out of and lifting lockdowns, and we're coming out and we're going back to opening up businesses and restaurants and pools and things like that, I think a lot of people are getting the idea that, okay, the virus is petering out. The virus is calming down. The virus, the infection rate is diminishing. We're going to be relatively safe from the virus soon. But it's not the same when it comes to police brutality, because no matter virus or not, whatever else is going on, we're still going to experience police brutality. So I just think that completely trumped any concerns about the virus for those reasons. It just felt so much more urgent to stand up, because there's no situation in which that video came out and everyone said, okay, let's wait 2 months to start protesting. That there was no situation where that would have happened. You would have waited 2 months, news would have moved on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. By the next 2 months, we probably would have already seen another video of police brutality. So I think it was just kind of like it just like now or never. I think it may be a radical statement or an extreme statement, but I think anybody who went out to protest truly in their heart felt like, I'd rather die from coronavirus than not stand up against police brutality. You have to feel that way if you know there's a deadly virus out there and you're choosing to go out and protest. I don't think there's any other way around it.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a tremendous issue, police brutality, and yes, is an oppression in general, and it's been around for a very long time. And I of course don't need to tell you about that. And then this virus. I guess my only concern is, while I do think it is improving and that it is dissipating, there's the big concern of the second wave, which everybody talks about. So, I mean, we'll see how bad that is.
I'm sure there will be a second wave.
Right, I think there will be as well. But so, speaking to that statistic, though, of more Black and brown.
Right. Totally forgot to address that.
No, it's okay. So,
but I do have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. So, do you know a lot? Well, I want to know your feelings on it, and I also want to know, do you feel like, do you know a lot of people who got the virus or who died because of the virus?
So this is what's very interesting. I personally only know I know one person that got the virus, and his girlfriend and his parents. And that's the only person I know that had the virus. But I don't think that's the case. I think that people may have felt that to have the virus is taboo, or, you wouldn't want to talk about it and go around telling people, oh yeah, I had the virus. So I'm sure there's probably a lot more people I know that tested positive for the virus and probably didn't just say anything. But on top of that, I'm sure there's a lot of people I know that had the virus and just were asymptomatic or never got tested and they beat it.
Right.
That's probably the biggest bulk of people that I know that have had the virus. But as far as it coming down harder on Black and brown communities, I saw that coming from the beginning, because at one point, right when this started, there were rumors going around that Black people couldn't get the virus. And in my head, I'm like, I'm telling you, Black people are probably going to be more susceptible, because in America, a lot of the issues or the health issues that plague the Black community happen to also be, I guess what you call comorbidities, or things that increase the risk of death for someone that contracts the coronavirus. For example, high blood pressure,
Right.
diabetes, things like that, smoking, all these things that increase the likelihood that you will die from the virus also are higher among the Black community. Um, so, but on top of that, I don't even think that's just it. I think another part of it is the way the healthcare system treats African Americans in general.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but Black women are 4 times more likely to die during childbirth in America than white women, and that is a ridiculous statistic. It doesn't make sense because this is not the case in other countries that have Black and white populations. This is the case in America,
Yeah.
and it's not, oh well, Black American women are just bad at giving birth. That's silly. There
Yeah.
has to be something coming from the top down that's affecting or affecting the process of Black women giving birth. And I think a lot of it has to do with what we've repeatedly seen and heard from, even from Black doctors. We've heard from white doctors, is that a lot of white doctors or non-Black doctors don't listen to Black women and listen to Black people when they say I'm in pain, or where they say, hey, I have this issue or this issue. A lot of them just write it off as, oh, you're overreacting, it's in your head, you're
Mm.
making it up. And we've seen so many reports of this. So of course, with the pandemic, it's not like that's just going to change overnight. We
Right.
live in a racist country with racist policies, racist institutions, and the healthcare has a history of its own racism. So of course that would translate into um, Black and brown people
Mm.
having a worse time getting treated or getting cared for with the virus. I mean, there was a story of a young kid around our age who tried to get tested for the virus 4 times and was denied every time, and he passed away from the virus.
Really?
And you know, sometimes I just have to think in my head, if this was a blonde chick, a blonde white girl, would she have had the same issues?
Mm.
I think about that a lot when it comes to police brutality, when it comes to, just yesterday, actually, I went to dig in, and I ordered my food on the app. I went and I got there, and the woman asked me, what delivery service do you work for? Or, what do you, Caviar, Uber Eats?
Right.
And I'm like, no, like I ordered on the app. I'm picking up my food. And as I was walking out, I just thought to myself, would she have asked me that question if I was like a white blonde girl?
Right.
And of course she wouldn't.
No.
Of
Yeah.
course she wouldn't. And it's those little things that I feel like every single Black person in New York has probably experienced, going to pick up food from a restaurant and being treated like you're a delivery driver rather than a
Right.
customer.
Right.
It's happened to me more than once. Every time it happens to me, it bothers me, because it's like, you should know better
Right.
than to just assume like that. But I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't know that statistic about Black women and childbirth, and I didn't know the
Yeah,
story about the
it's a tough
young
it's a tough
Black man.
statistic.
Yeah, it's very tough. And I didn't know the story about the young Black child who was denied 4 times. And
Because of that statistic, America has one of the highest rates of death in childbirth in the developed world,
really.
like far higher than France, Germany, UK. I mean,
Mm.
a lot of countries we consider allies, we have the highest rate of dying in childbirth. You know,
It's
so
very
it's really
sad.
sad, and it doesn't make sense because America's so rich and the best, and
Right.
all this science and all these doctors. It really doesn't add up.
Yeah, I think we're realizing we're not the best, and that we do have a lot of issues that
Yeah, I
need
think
addressing.
2020 it's made all our sight very clear
Yeah.
of what America is, or what it's, or not what it is, but what it's not. You
Yeah.
know, we have 100,000 dead from this virus or more, but I think now we're at 110,000. We have police gassing and beating peaceful protesters. We have police beating up the press. I think people, how can you look at this and think America is what it portrays itself to be?
Right.
I think it's a great country. I think it's a beautiful country. I think it's full of the most amazing people. I mean, even just outside of people and politics, I mean, the nature of the country is insane. It's incredible. You know, look at California, look at New Jersey, you know, all these beautiful places in this country. But I think, you know, there's a lot of issues that just have not been addressed. And the reason they haven't been addressed is because every issue that plagues America, somebody's profiting off that issue. And that person that profits off this issue is going to do everything in their power to make sure that issue isn't fixed because they want to continue profiting. So we have to really look at what we want to do as a country. Take this year with the pandemic and the protests, look at it all and say, what as a country are we going to do to get closer to what we portray ourselves as to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would maybe write you off as being overly cynical, but I do think that what you're saying really does hold true for a lot of this, and there are unfortunately a lot of people profiteering off the suffering of others, and it's
Right.
very upsetting.
I mean, look at the healthcare industry. That's a prime example.
Right.
Actually, I was in the city yesterday. I had to go to Bellevue Hospital because I got a $2,400 bill for a routine STI and HIV test. A $2,400 bill. And
insane.
everything was negative. I didn't receive any treatment at all, but I got a $2,400 bill.
That's crazy.
Just for the test. And I have insurance.
Right.
I have health insurance. So it's just stuff like this that just doesn't happen in other countries.
Right.
And, you know, it's why do we have to deal with this? Why do we have to suffer and deal with this stuff when there's no reason for us to, except for the fact that, like I said, there's somebody obviously profiting off this, you know. But I have like a lot of I'm very optimistic about what this country can be and what it will be. I think the people of this country have great hearts and great souls. And I think everybody knows what's right and what is wrong. And I just think we need more people like that to stand up and not be afraid to put themselves out there and run locally. I think it is all going to start locally. You know, any change that's going to really happen in this country is going to start locally. And local elections are typically the least cared about. You know, most people don't give a damn about voting for their, you know, city council or even their mayor. You know, most people only vote for in presidential elections, and I think that's something that has to change. And I think we need more young people running in local elections. Definitely. We need more people our age on city councils. We need more people our age being mayor.
Yeah.
And then we can actually we can really change things, of course. And I think people just don't think it's possible. But if it is totally possible. Some places elect dogs as their mayors. Why not a 23 or 24-year-old?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want a dog as the mayor, but I'd love to have you as our mayor. You know, maybe you could run for something.
I couldn't run New York City. That's a bit too big. But maybe, you know,
maybe city council or something. You know?
Yeah,
you know,
maybe you should run
small.
Mayor Dre Black. That'd be awesome.
Well, we'll see about that. But so tying it back to maybe George Floyd a little bit, I just have a question for you. You know, I think sometimes it can be hard for white people to know the right way to express their empathy for marginalized groups. And,
right.
You know, do you appreciate when people reached out to you, if they did reach out to you after George Floyd, and asking you how you were doing, or did it seem trivial, or maybe did other reactions or emotions come up?
That's a really good question. So I think I guess I appreciate any gesture, big or small. Okay. So if I know it's coming from a good place or someone has good intentions, I'll always take that before I take any. You know, I'll look at that before I look at anything else, even if it may be inappropriate or out of touch or anything like that. If I know that the person had good intentions, that's the main thing to me.
Mm.
But when people have reached out to me, a lot of my friends in London, especially, and in Lebanon, especially, have reached out to me and said, "Hey, I see everything that's going on.
Right.
We're worried about you. How are you doing? How you feeling?" And I appreciate that. I really do appreciate it when people reach out to me in these situations, just to lend an ear, or whatever it is, just to say, hey, this is horrible, but if you need anything or you want to talk, like, I'm here, and I really appreciate that, whether whoever the person is. But what I really appreciated even more was seeing virtually all of my white friends, or the majority of them, and even white friends that I would typically consider a little more leaning towards libertarian or conservative, or don't usually are not usually vocal about issues of police brutality, or don't see it as a widespread issue or things like that. Just people that I would not have expected to speak up and say anything.
Mm.
I'm seeing those people being very vocal, and that is what has made me feel great, to know that maybe something is changing. If these people that probably voted for Trump, or their families voted for Trump, are actually coming out vocally in front of all their followers, whatever political leanings they may be. These are people from small suburban towns, from rural towns, from towns that are just very red.
Yeah.
And they're saying, we need to end police brutality. We need to reform the police. We need to do something about the police. The police are racist. George Floyd, that wasn't an accident. It happened because he was black. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or not because he was black. It happened because the police officer was a racist. And I just think it's extremely, I wouldn't say heartwarming. I think that sounds silly, but it is a good feeling to see people from different sides of the political spectrum actually uniting behind something that has been so divisive in this country.
Mm.
For some reason, I don't know why, but
Mm.
it's been extremely divisive. Police brutality, for whatever reason. But I feel like, people from all over the political spectrum, from all different age groups, all different backgrounds, are actually uniting and saying enough is enough. We don't want to live in this country where police do this to people. That's my biggest thing, is like, even if I was a white person, why would I want to live in a country where the police just kill people for no reason? I mean, that's not fun. That's not okay. And most importantly, just knowing that that doesn't happen in every country. So why do we as Americans feel comfortable with it happening here? But I think as an ally, I guess, that's kind of the term now for somebody who's not black, who speaks up or is against injustices committed against black people. I think the best thing you can do is speak up without involving, without immediately involving. I guess what I'm saying is, you don't have to necessarily go to your black or minority friends and ask them what you should do. I think the first thing you should do is let what's in your heart out
Mm.
first. And of course, if they say, hey, I think maybe this thing you said was a bit inappropriate, or I think you should word it differently because it could really come off racist, I don't think you should get defensive and say, hey, I'm trying to help you out, or hey, I'm
Right.
trying to just, I think you should listen and say,
Right.
you obviously would know more than me because you're a minority and I'm not.
Right. Right.
So I think that's the first thing. I have seen a lot of people, make statements or do things that just were kind of in bad taste.
Mm.
And I think the intentions were good, and people called them out on it. And instead of going about it the right way, they got defensive. And I think as an ally, that's what you want to try to avoid, is being defensive when somebody calls you out and tells you that maybe you could go about things a little differently. And then most importantly, that person that's calling you out, it's not about you personally at all. And I think some people just take it personally when somebody says, hey, maybe your post, maybe if you use a different picture, or maybe you shouldn't share the video of George Floyd being killed, or maybe you shouldn't use the picture of him, his actual, death in your post. I appreciate what you said, but maybe you could just re-upload it with a picture of him while he was still alive or something like that.
Right.
And, like I said, the most important thing is to not get defensive, is to just say, hey, I appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'd be happy to do it if that's better. But I think it is extremely important to have white allies. If you look at the civil rights movement, if you look at pictures from the civil rights movement, 40 to 45% of those crowds were white people in those protests, in those mass protests. A lot of the people that contributed to the civil rights movement were white people. And of course, they didn't make the movement. They didn't, it wasn't about them, but Black people don't make up a lot of this country. They're only 13% of the population, and they're already treated as second-class citizens. They don't hold a lot of power in this country. So it's extremely difficult for them alone to create change. So we need white allies. We need Latino allies. We need allies from all across. We need gay allies. We need allies from all across the board to come together and say, we all want change for Black people. And I guess that's the most important thing to remember as an ally, that you're fighting for a change for a group of people that you don't belong to. So you need to be sensitive to how they respond to your work as an ally. And that's how you strengthen your work as an ally. It's almost like, you can think about it like a workshop or any other type of roundtable, discussion. It's okay, somebody, say, a white person puts out an idea, or they post something, and of course, the Black people that are around them, they should feel comfortable with the Black people around them saying, hey, maybe we could change this, maybe change that, or whatever, without getting offensive. Because I just think that's the way forward, is with cooperation, compromise, and understanding of one another.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I appreciate you lending me your thoughts. I do think that there is a tendency for people to be defensive. They're putting themselves out in a little bit of a vulnerable spot, trying to
Right.
Trying to do the right thing, and as a result, they feel exposed. And if somebody pushes
Right.
back on him, their guard goes up. So, but that
Of
is something
course.
to watch out for.
That's human. That's a human instinct,
Right. Right. And
Right.
the other part, the intention, I think is also very important, and I think people can pick up on whether you're really being genuine or not. So that's big too. Just
Right.
rounding out here, what are I like to end my interviews, the latest iterations of these COVID chats, with what are a few things you can't wait to do again?
I cannot fucking wait to go to Six Flags. Oh my God. I want to go to Six Flags so bad. I want to go to Six Flags so bad. I hope I can go this summer. I hope they figure that out, because I love Six Flags. After that, I can't wait to go to Rockaway Beach and Coney Island. Those are my favorite beaches. I live in New Jersey. The Jersey Shore is right there. I hate the Jersey Shore. I would much rather go to Fulton Street and take the A all the way to Rockaway Beach and just hang out. I think that's probably my favorite beach in the world, Rockaway Beach, which probably nobody has ever said before in the history of New York City. But I can't wait till they open the New York City beaches and I can go to Rockaway Beach. And I'm really looking forward to that first restaurant outing with my friends, just sitting at a restaurant, ordering food and having drinks. It's probably going to be outside, which is awesome. I love sitting outside and eating.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm looking forward to. And I am really, really, really looking forward to Beirut airport opening, because as soon as it opens, I would love to take a trip to Beirut. So those are my biggest I can't wait things. I cannot wait for those things to happen.
That's awesome.
And I can't wait to see you later, hopefully.
Yeah, let's hang. Let's go for a bike ride. Well,
nice social distance bike ride.
yeah, yes, we will be apart from each other. Well, Niall, I want to thank you for coming on the program and for sharing all your thoughts and for really, putting yourself out there and going deep on some of these issues and how it's affected you. And
Thank you for having me, man.
yeah,
Really appreciate
really,
it.
really a pleasure. I'll let you know when it's posted. Should be tomorrow, and I'll call you after this, and we'll talk about that bike ride.
Oh yeah, I was gonna call you too.
Okay,
Sounds good.
good. Okay, see you, buddy.